You know the name Fyodor Dostoevsky, the literary giant, right? The guy who gave us masterpieces like Crime and Punishment. But what if I told you that behind that genius was a hidden architect? A woman who not only saved his career from complete and total collapse, but who actually built the very platform for his greatest works, for his entire legacy. Her name was Anna Snitkina, and believe me, her story is one you need to hear. Okay, so just picture this. The year is 1866. A 20-year-old professional stenographer shows up at an apartment, and those are some of the first words the 44-year-old literary legend says to her. Can you imagine? He's gloomy, he's irritable, he can't even get her name right. It is such a bizarre, awkward start to a partnership that would literally change Russian literature forever. And it all began with a crisis that was about to explode. To really get why Anna was so indispensable, you first have to understand just how desperate Dostoevsky's situation was. I mean, this was a man teetering on the absolute edge of professional and financial ruin, a total disaster in the making. Look at this number, 25,000 rubles. It's staggering. After his brother died, Dostoevsky took on all his family's debts, plus the debt from their failed literary journal. And to put that number into perspective for you, for a low-level civil servant at the time, that was about 50 years of salary. He was being completely and utterly crushed. So in his desperation, he walked right into a predator's trap. This publisher, a guy named Stellovsky, offers him a 3,000 ruble advance, but the terms, they were just brutal. Dostoevsky had to deliver a completely new novel by November 1st. The problem? He was pouring every last ounce of his energy into finishing Crime and Punishment. By early October, just weeks from the deadline, he hadn't written a single page, not one. And the penalty for failure was unthinkable. Stellovsky would own the rights to everything Dostoevsky wrote for the next 9 years, for free. This wasn't just a bad deal, it was a professional death sentence. So, with his career hanging by a thread, his friends are panicking. They're even offering to secretly ghostwrite the book for him just to save him. But Dostoevsky refuses. Instead, he decides to gamble on this brand new technology and on the top student from the local stenography school, Anna Snitkina. And they immediately fall into this grueling but unbelievably effective routine. From noon to 4 every day, Dostoevsky would just pace around his room, smoking, drinking the super strong tea, and literally acting out the characters of a brand new novel, The Gambler. Anna's job was to capture it all in shorthand. Then she'd go home and work all night, transcribing it into a clean manuscript. And this process, you see, it didn't just save time. It actually changed his writing, giving it this new, breathless, kind of spoken quality that you really see in his later masterpieces. And it worked. Incredibly, it worked. They created an entire novel, from a blank page to a finished manuscript in just 26 days. It was an absolutely impossible feat. They had beaten the clock. Or so they thought. Because the publisher, Stellovsky, he had one last dirty trick up his sleeve. So on the very last day, Dostoevsky discovers that Stellovsky has vanished. Poof, his office is closed, he skipped town, all to make it impossible to deliver the manuscript and force a default. Dostoevsky is, of course, panicking. But Anna, with her calm, practical, brilliant mind, sees the solution. Go to the police station, she says, file the manuscript there, and get a time-stamped receipt. He did exactly that. And that simple piece of paper became the legal proof that saved his entire career. Just a few days after this massive victory, Dostoevsky decides to propose. But, he couldn't just come out and say it. He was too scared of being rejected. So he frames it as a plot for a new novel about an old, sick painter who falls for a young woman named Anya. He asks for her professional opinion. Is it psychologically plausible? And then he puts the question to her, but through his fictional character. Her answer? Immediate and total. They got married in February 1867. But their professional triumph very quickly gave way to this period of just intense personal struggle. This was no fairy tale. This was a trial by fire. They left Russia for what was supposed to be a 3-month honeymoon. Well, that turned into a 4-year exile. They just drifted across Germany, Switzerland, Italy, constantly on the run from the creditors that were hounding them. And it was here, in Europe, that Dostoevsky's greatest personal demon just exploded. His addiction to gambling. And this is where Anna's approach was just truly radical. As Dostoevsky lost everything they had at the roulette tables, he would come back to her in this suicidal despair. Now, anyone else would have screamed or blamed him, right? But Anna realized something absolutely crucial. Blaming him would trigger his guilt, which could then trigger one of his epileptic seizures, making it impossible for him to write. So she made this conscious, strategic choice. She separated the sickness from the man. The addiction, that was an illness to be managed. The man underneath it all, that was her husband, the genius she loved.
I mean, just think about the strength that took. He gambled away all their money. He had her pawn her jewelry, her winter coat, even her wedding ring. And through all of it, she never once judged him. And this incredible, unbelievable patience, it eventually broke the cycle of shame that was fueling the addiction. In 1871, after one last devastating loss, he wrote to her, promising he was a new man. And you know what? He never gambled again.
So when they finally returned to Russia in 1871, they were still completely broke. But Anna was no longer just a wife and a stenographer. She was about to become a revolutionary businesswoman.
Dostoevsky's next novel was Demons. Now, normally, he'd sell the rights to a publisher for some tiny fee. But Anna had seen enough exploitation. She made a decision that was just unheard of for a woman in 19th century Russia. She said, "We will publish it ourselves." She personally went undercover in bookshops to research profit margins. She negotiated directly with paper suppliers and printers. She seized control of the entire process.
And the result was a total game changer. Remember that terrible Stellovsky contract that offered 3,000 rubles for 9 years of his work? Well, by publishing Demons all by herself, Anna made a net profit of 4,000 rubles from just a single edition of one book. In one single move, she broke the cycle of debt and dependency that had plagued him his entire life.
And this is so crucial to understand. Anna's business sense directly created the conditions for Dostoevsky's final masterpiece. By 1878, for the first time in his adult life, he was free from debt. That financial peace, that mental space, that's what gave him the stability to write his most profound novel, The Brothers Karamazov.
Dostoevsky died in 1881. Anna was only 35 years old, but her work, it was far from over. She would spend the next 37 years of her life not just preserving her husband's memory, but actively constructing his immortality.
She was anything but a passive widow. She became a publisher, an archivist, a museum curator, and a fierce defender of his reputation. When a former friend slandered Dostoevsky in a letter to Tolstoy after he died, Anna wrote her own memoirs as a direct response, making sure that her version of the man, the kind, loving husband she knew, would stand as a permanent counter-narrative for all time.
This was her response to Tolstoy after he'd read that vicious letter. It is the very core of her life's testimony. You see, she saw the whole man, the genius, the epileptic, the addict, the sinner, and the saint. And this was her final verdict, delivered to his greatest living rival.
Her own end is just a tragic irony. Fleeing the chaos of the Russian Revolution, she ended up stranded in Yalta. The woman who single-handedly managed a literary empire, who cleared thousands in debt and secured one of the greatest legacies in all of literature, died alone in poverty from malaria and starvation. So it leaves us with this final question, doesn't it? A genius writes the books, absolutely. But who writes that genius into history? Anna Dostoevskaya's life is the answer. She was the strategist who beat the deadline, the psychologist who healed the addiction, and the publisher who built the empire. She didn't just transcribe the words, she created the very conditions for their existence, and then she cemented their place in history, forever. She was the architect.